Hello and welcome everyone. Today I'm going to do a ponytail. Very exciting. But we're actually going to have a few other little hair ties here, and it's going to kind of go into a triangle, and then we're going to do a nice high ponytail. Okay, so you'll need a pintail comb for this, or just a normal comb. I just find these are a little bit easier. You're also going to need one really big sort of thick hairband, some see-through or clear elastic bands, and then just a few of these curvy grips. Okay, so you want a middle parting, and then as I said, we're going to sort of create a triangle. So from here I'm going to bring it to the front, almost, as you can see, to the end of my eyebrow. Just like that. Just going to clip that one. And then of course you want to try and get it exactly the same on the other side. And then really, to make sure that they are completely equal, I'm going to bring them together and then just twist, and then really have a look in the mirror. Okay, now you want to get rid of the rest of your hair. So I'm just going to tie that back. And then we're going to bring this back. Now again, I always like having a little bit of hair just to shape my face a little bit there. So I'm just going to get my first layer right at the front. So you don't want it to be too thick, you want it to be quite thin, so roughly around that much. I'm going to put a hairband in here, and then I'm going to add in the next layer until I can't go any further. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the deaths of orcas in captivity. Now, some of these causes are completely unknown, so it's very difficult to find out exactly why they died, but it's quite interesting to go through some of the reasons. Apparently, even in the wild, though, a lot of them do suffer from pneumonia, and there are like varying degrees of severity. One of them is called acute hemorrhage. There's a bacterial one, and I can never remember this one. Oh yes, multifocal pygranulomatous. There's going to be a lot of names at the beginning of this that I'm not going to be able to pronounce particularly well, but I will try my hardest. Okay, so there's also interstitial pneumonia, which is basically a lung disease which can be caused by long-term exposure to hazardous materials such as asbestos, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of before. It was largely used in the 80s for building materials such as cement products and spray coatings. Now, I couldn't see if it was used in aquariums, but I did read that it was used a lot in swimming pools. So who knows, it may have been used, but that disease can also be unknown. So apparently, according to the whale and dolphin conservation, who've been following the deaths of whales for about 30 years, said that 46 in captivity have died. And that's not including the stillborns, which is like roughly around 30. And I said, actually, quite a long time ago, they didn't even have to tell anyone, if there was a stillborn. So who knows, there could be many more stillborn deaths that we just don't know about. Okay, so that's the second one that I've done there. Can you see they're pretty close? There's only a small gap between them. And so I just basically want to keep adding the hair in until there's no hair left. Okay, so another one is called GI tract obstruction, which is basically in the intestine. And the normal process of digesting food becomes very difficult because something is blocked. And what causes that can be inflammation of the intestine, pouches in the intestine can become infected, or it could mean that the bowel is twisted, which sounds really, really painful. And another one that's difficult to say, acute necrotizing encephalitis. Basically, it's inflammation of the brain, and it can occur after having a viral infection like the flu. And unfortunately, it can cause things like hallucinations, fits, and inflammation of the brain. But this can also be caused by injury, so it could have been like a head injury or something as well. And the next one doesn't sound nice at all. Intestinal, I thought I'd test myself, it didn't work. Ganglioneroma. And that's tumours, but actually they're benign, which means they're not cancerous. But if they've been there for a long time and they've, expanded and gotten really big, then other symptoms can come along, especially if it's like pressing on the back of the spinal cord. That can cause paralysis, especially if it hasn't been dealt with promptly. And the next one is mycotic meningoencephalitis. Yeah, something like that. So mycotic is basically a fungal disease that invades the tissue, but the first part of the long word that I can't pronounce is meninges. Yeah. They are the layers of tissue that cover your brain. If these tissues become infected, then you can get something called meningitis, which I'm sure a few of you have heard of that. But then if the brain becomes inflamed or infected, the problem is then called encephalicitis. And then put those two together, makes that lovely big long word. And that's what makes it interesting. They're in SeaWorld, which has the best facilities, and it's very expensive, and they probably have vets that are on call to help out with any problems. Now, I know the whales can't necessarily come up to them and say, this is what the problem is, I'm not feeling well. But it does seem like there's still quite a lot of things that are going wrong. They're still getting quite a few diseases, and a lot of them are still dying in captivity. Because some people are like, yes, but they're getting the best medical care. And you think, but would they be getting this ill in the wild? I'm sure lots of them still do. As I said, pneumonia is a main cause of the death in the wild. But I don't think as many would be dying from all of these different, other strange diseases. And the fact that they can get the flu, well, they can actually get it from us. We can actually pass on things to the whales as well. And of course, they're in the water with them. Well, they used to be in the water with them, but even now, if they're feeding them, we're still getting pretty close to them. So I'm not surprised that they could probably, get something from us. So I'm going to move on to their diet now. Whilst I go on to the diet, I'm just going to, as you can see, I'm doing a really high ponytail. So I actually want to get my ponytail all the way up here. So I'm just going to put my head back a little bit and I think I'm as high as I want to be. And then I'm going to use one of these super stretchy hairbands. So yes, their diet is fish, and they're not quite as fresh as I thought they would be. But I know these whales, they eat a hell of a lot of fish per day. So it must be difficult just to get fresh fish constantly coming into SeaWorld. So what they do is they freeze it. The only trouble is, in the thawing process, a lot of the moisture, the water from the fish is lost. And that's where the whales get their hydration from. So what they've actually decided to do is put gelatin with it, which is what we use in a lot of our desserts, wibble wobble jelly on the plate. It's also used in pharmaceuticals. It's great for arthritis, strengthening of the bones. So I thought, oh, well, maybe this would actually be, extra nutrition for the whales, as well as having the water from gelatin as well. But no, apparently because of the vigorous process gelatin goes through, it's not very helpful for the whales. And of course, these are huge, massive creatures, so they'd probably need a hell of a lot in order for it to actually make any difference. Okay, so just quickly, I'm going to now cover these hairbands up with hair cuffs, which you may have seen me use in a few other videos. So these are the hair cuffs that I've got. They're just little cuffs like that, quite pretty. And I'm just going to place them over the hairbands to cover them. And now we want to cover up this hairband with a few curvy grips. So from underneath, I'm just going to get a thin piece of hair like so. I'm going to wrap it round until the hairband is completely covered, and then I'm going to pin it underneath. So I'm actually pinning this almost into the actual ponytail. There we are, like so. I'm going to bring these bits to the front. So I'm actually going to do a few little braids going down here, and then we're going to put some more hair cuffs in, so you'll have a little bit of like silver or gold colour coming through your ponytail as well. So there was an ex-trainer who mentioned that because there wasn't really much nutrition left in this fish by the time the whales ate it, they would also, well, she said stuff them with vitamins, but I think that's because she just really wanted to get her point across. But I think, you know, vitamins were put into the fish. Us humans, you know, we take supplements, lots of vitamins for our skin, hair, nails to, you know, boost immunity. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I guess it's a combination of all these unnatural things that probably isn't very helpful. So Samantha also mentioned that medication would be put into the fish as well. You know, if a whale wasn't feeling particularly well, or perhaps it, you know, was injured and it needed to heal quickly, then medication would be put into the fish. But you then start thinking about this fish, it's just sort of a vessel and nothing else, because it gives no hunting entertainment, no hydration, and no nutritional purpose. So it's just a bit sad that you've got this fish, you know, that should usually have all the nutritional stuff in it, and yet you're actually having to change what you're doing to this fish in order to help the whales. Just, you know, it seems a bit crazy. And also, of course, if they're in the wild, their diet, you know, would be penguins, seals, sea lions, octopi, squid, even sharks they would eat. Can you imagine the nutritional benefits that they would get from eating all of those? You know, whereas at SeaWorld, they don't necessarily have a very varied diet. And I would be okay with this if the orcas had been saved. You know, perhaps they were ill, or they had been injured, or perhaps they were brought to SeaWorld for a breeding program because they were about to become extinct. Whereas we know that's not quite true. They were stolen from the ocean, from their family, for entertainment purposes. Oh yes, and speaking about medications, so one of them that they would put inside their food was diazepam. Most of you will know it as Valium. For us humans, it's used for anxiety, alcohol withdrawal, fits, and it's also used as a calming measure as well. But what I found out, and this was really interesting, that whales and dolphins, they are voluntary breathers, which basically means in order for them to breathe, on some level, they still need to be conscious. But if you think about what Valium does, that actually reduces the blood flow to the brain, So they have to be really careful with how much they give to them. And of course, with any drug, there are side effects. And one of them is CNS depression, which is central nervous system. And that's a result of decreased heart rate, which we know isn't very good for the whales. Effectively, it's inactivity of the brain. And lots of people already say that they don't have much to stimulate them anyway. So if they're on this, it's probably not really a good thing. And I don't know, I had an idea because obviously in the main pool, they want customers to be able to view the whales as quickly as possible. So that's why there's nothing on the walls, it's just blue. But why not in the back pools when the customers aren't really going to see them there? Even just painting the walls to look like the wild. I mean, that's got to be a little bit more interesting for the whales to look at. Or at least it's got to be better than nothing. Obviously, they have the shows to stimulate them. And I'm not saying that all the whales absolutely hate it all the time. I'm sure it's probably something interesting for them. It's keeping them busy. But day in, day out, we also know from many videos that they get annoyed and frustrated and a little bit aggressive. So I actually found this website called SeaWorld Fact Checker. I don't think it's got anything to do with SeaWorld, but it's interesting because SeaWorld has actually answered some of their questions. So it's quite interesting to read through. Although there was one thing that they said which didn't really paint them in a particularly great light. They said if the whales and dolphins don't get enough water, to keep them hydrated, they, as a last resort, will force them to swallow a gastric tube which will go into their stomach, and that's where they will pump fresh water into it. That sounds like a nice evening for one of the whales, doesn't it? I know that they're doing this to help the whales, but it keeps going back, doesn't it? You're thinking, well, yes, but if you didn't steal them, you wouldn't need to do this. Or, yes, but if your food wasn't frozen and it had the nutritional benefits, you wouldn't have to do this. So it's just, yeah, I'm trying not to have like an overall negative feel about SeaWorld today. But it's difficult when you read things like that. Then I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to go on to SeaWorld website and, I don't know, read a couple of articles. It might just be interesting. There was one article that said, animals need SeaWorld now more than ever. There was about 100 things that I wanted to say back to that statement, but I didn't. And I won't, because we could be here for a while, but I'll just let that one sink in. And there was a lady saying, oh, we helped this sea turtle that ended up having plastic and foil in its stomach, and it's now recovering at SeaWorld. And you think, gosh, that's awful, because plastic is from us. That's from pollution that we have caused with our rubbish. But that interview of the man back in the 70s, I can't get out of my head. When they would steal the baby orcas and some of the mothers would drown in the nets left behind, and they were told to put rocks into their stomach so they would sink to the bottom of the ocean. And that was also caused by us, but obviously a little bit more vicious. And then there was another lady called Jodie Westberg. Let's see. Yeah, she said, I've been helping more than 34,000 animal rescues over the past 5 decades, in an incredible milestone, and I'm glad to play a role in these life-saving efforts. However, it's up to each of us to combat the causes of ocean degradation. Every ticket purchased to SeaWorld parks supports our rescue operations, which keeps us on the front line of the latest conservation research, the Pacific coast and beyond. But every ticket bought also means that you agree to the capture and forced entertainment of killer whales. And even though the breeding stopped in 2016 and the live shows in 2019, we want to know now what's going to happen to the whales, especially if they're not doing shows. They are going to need something to keep them busy, to keep them interactive and to stimulate them. Those are the articles I want to be reading about. I mean, it's very difficult to pat them on the back and go, well done, you've done all this amazing stuff, but you've also got a really horrible dark history. You're capable of doing something like that. It's very difficult to forget and forgive. Now, I'm sure work policies have changed a lot, and I'm sure lots of different people now work there. And Jodie, the work she does sounds fantastic, and I'm not poo-pooing that at all. I think it's amazing. But I also think, do some of these people know about what happened? It would be interesting to, interview some of them and say, oh, I think this is amazing work. What about the ones that were stolen and brought here and forced to breed over and over and over and over again? And I can just imagine saying, oh, well, yeah, that's the black sheep of the family. We don't really talk about that anymore. But the stuff I've been doing now is really great. It's almost like they've just pushed that into the background and it's sort of forgotten. But it's very difficult, and it does leave a bit of a bad taste, unfortunately. Okay, so now we're going to move on to sunburn. This is a rumour that's been flying around quite often, that apparently lots of them get sunburn and SeaWorld is covering them up with black zinc oxide, so the customers can't see. But I don't think I really believe in this, because especially if it's already been sunburnt, their skin, I think the worst thing to do is to put, zinc oxide, because that's actually supposed to prevent the sunburn. So it's not going to do anything if they've already got the burn. It would actually irritate the whale more. And I think it would be really quite painful, to be honest. It would sting a lot. Whether they cover it up with something else, I don't know. But I do feel like that was a bit extreme. I'm just not quite sure that I completely believe in that. But apparently, if they have already gotten sunburnt and they've only realised, the next day or something, they do have something called, I think it's A&D ointment, which just basically helps with the healing process. And there were a few trainers that mentioned putting this black zinc oxide onto the whales, but I think there was one lady that worked there for 15 years and she said she only needed to do it 5 times, which is fair enough. But yes, I can imagine they do get sunburn because, of course, through training and doing the shows, they would have been on the surface a lot more often than perhaps if they were in the wild. And I think some of the trainers said they would only really use this stuff if a whale was unwell, because apparently if they're not feeling well, they come to the surface a lot more. And I guess just to protect them, they would put this stuff on. But I think in SeaWorld, when you do look, there is quite a lot of shade around. And I think there would be in the back pool as well. So I don't know if that's a huge issue, but yeah, I mean, it's just another thing on top of the pile, to add to the reasons why perhaps they shouldn't be in captivity. If you spread all of these things out and you think, oh, well, that thing's quite small, it's not huge for the whales, and then you add the next thing on and on and on, actually it builds up and up and up, and you think, yeah, maybe it's not so great that they're in captivity. Again, if they were because they needed to be in captivity, then I would understand, or I'd be a bit more understanding towards this program of what they were doing. But yeah, it's difficult. And another issue is to do with their teeth. And I've seen some pretty horrendous photos, which I'll show you here. So this is what a normal mouth of an orca is supposed to look like. And this is what has been shown and captured at SeaWorld. So apparently this is due to chewing on some of the gates, but they gnaw them down so much that it actually goes to the nerves, which I can imagine quite painful. So what they need to do is drill into the tooth. I guess it's a bit like a root canal for us, but unfortunately they don't fill them in, they don't cap them. You know, we have like fillings, whereas these are just sort of gaping holes that are left. And of course food can get trapped in, so they have to be really careful. They have to flush the teeth out every single day, and if not, then it can cause infection. And if it causes infection, then it's another medication that they have to have, which is chronic antibiotic therapy. But as you can imagine, that's not going to be particularly great for their immune system. So it's all these things, as I say, if it's built up, you do begin to think, well, if their immune system isn't so great, is this then what can make them ill? And then if they're ill and it's not noticed and it's not caught in time, can it then cause more damage? Can it then cause these diseases which ultimately then kills them? You know, so it's food for thought. As I said, you take away what you want. I've taken away a little bit. I don't want to believe absolutely everything that I'm reading on Google, so I do try and get accounts from trainers that are actually working at SeaWorld. I don't want to just get real, you know, anti-captivity, we're just going to say everything we want to make it sound really bad. Because as I said, probably most of the people at SeaWorld love and care about these animals. You know, it's more sort of the management, I think, and a few people. But as I said, you know, it was a long, long time ago that the real horrible things happened. But I just hope now they are thinking about sorting it out and helping them, which I will definitely do a video on. I will see, you know, what kind of measures they're going to take for the orcas that are now left in captivity. Okay, so now I've got two little braids. I did say in my last video that I've bought these hair cuffs that are extra long, which are really cool, especially if you've got braids coming down like this, because they tend to show up a little bit more like that. They're really cool. I'm quite pleased with these. So don't put them too close to each other though. Put that one a little bit further down. And then I'm going to add a few colours. Obviously, the further you go down the braid, the thinner it's going to be, so it's going to be a bit more difficult. And then what I like to do is just cover the hairband up right at the end. Okay, there we have it. You can put as many in as you want. You can always curl the ends if you want to as well, but I'm just going to keep them straight for today. So I hope everyone's getting excited about Halloween. I'm going to do a little bit of a Halloween special, and the hairstyle is going to be pretty weird. It's going to be cool, a little bit crazy, but very funky. So hopefully you'll enjoy that one. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.